On the night of March 8, 2014, a Malaysia Airlines flight carrying 239 people vanished into thin air. For over 10 years, this mystery has haunted the world, consuming more than $200 million in search efforts that, until recently, came up empty. You may know the story of MH370. A plane takes off, flies into the night, and then gone. But the truth is, the version most of us hold barely scratches the surface. What really happened that chilling night is far more complex, raising more questions than answers. Let's rewind. It was just after midnight on March 8, 2014. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777, lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m., heading toward Beijing. On board were 239 people, tourists, business travelers, and entire families. For the first half hour, everything was boringly normal, a smooth climb and routine chatter with air traffic control. The plane was cruising peacefully at 35,000 feet by 1:01 a.m. Then came the last words anyone ever heard from the cockpit. At 1:19 a.m., the Malaysian controller told the pilot to check in with Vietnamese airspace control. The pilot's reply was calm as ever. Good night, Malaysian 370. 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., the plane's transponder went dark. The transponder is the device that makes a plane visible on civilian radar, reporting its ID, altitude, and speed. To the outside world, it looked like the aircraft had simply blinked out of existence. But here's is the first major twist. The plane hadn't vanished, not yet. While civilian radar lost it, Malaysia's military radar, which works differently, kept picking something up. Investigators later confirmed that this unidentified blip was most likely MH370. Only now, the plane wasn't following its designated flight path at all. It had made a sharp, deliberate, and controlled left turn. Instead of heading northeast toward Beijing, it swung back west, crossing over the Malay Peninsula. It kept flying toward the Andaman Sea, out over its own home turf. Military radar tracked it for another hour until 2:22 a.m. when it disappeared off their screens northwest of Penang Island. No distress call, no explanation, just silence. But the plane was still whispering into space. The aircraft's satellite data unit quietly reconnected with an Inmarsat satellite orbiting over the Indian Ocean. This was a maintenance handshake, a simple, "Yep, still here" ping, not meant for tracking. These ghostly signals, however, ended up being the only real evidence of MH370's path for the next 6 hours. There were 7 of these pings in total. Investigators clung to these breadcrumbs, using data like the burst timing offset, signal delay, and the burst frequency offset Doppler shift to try and map the plane's journey. This analysis resulted in enormous, sweeping arcs across the planet. The northern route, across Asia, was quickly ruled out due to the high density of military and civilian radars. All attention focused south, into the vast emptiness of the Indian Ocean. This path led to what became known as the 7th arc. According to the math, that final curve established at 8:19 a.m. when the last handshake came in was the final line drawn where MH370 most likely ran out of fuel and drifted down. And so began the world's most expensive and frustrating search.
The search for MH370 quickly escalated, becoming the most expensive operation in aviation history, costing between $135 million and $160 million. Dozens of ships, planes, and later deep-sea drones scoured an area of 120,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Pennsylvania. They spent years dragging sonar across the seabed. And what did they find? Nothing substantial at the main search site. Over time, a handful of debris pieces did wash up thousands of miles away. The first confirmed piece was a flaperon, found in July 2015 on Réunion Island. Other bits, including interior paneling, were found in Mozambique, Madagascar, and Tanzania. But none of this debris held the smoking gun. No cockpit voice recorder, no flight data recorder, and no definitive answers. The search had hit a wall. If the Inmarsat satellite math was so brilliant, why did it lead to an empty ocean floor? This vacuum of clear evidence allowed one primary explanation to take hold: the official theory. This theory suggested that Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a 53-year-old veteran pilot with over 18,000 flight hours, hijacked his own plane. According to this narrative, he calmly switched off communications, made the U-turn across Malaysia, depressurized the cabin to incapacitate everyone on board, and then kept flying south into the remote Indian Ocean for almost 7 hours. The massive Boeing 777 supposedly slipped quietly into the sea in what was dubbed a ghost flight or zombie flight once the fuel ran dry. This chilling pilot self-harm story was neat and easy for headlines, but when investigators started looking closely at the data and the wreckage, the theory began to fall apart in massive ways. First, the satellite data itself was contradictory. The final set of data, around 8:19 a.m., showed something strange in the burst frequency offset, or BFO. The numbers suggested the aircraft wasn't gliding down gently in a controlled ditching. Instead, the data pointed to a sharp drop in altitude, a sudden downward acceleration. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau's own review of the BFO suggested the jet may have been descending at up to 15,000 feet per minute. That rate is not a controlled landing. That is falling out of the sky. Second, the wreckage pointed to violent impact. The confirmed flaperon found on Réunion Island was not in the condition expected from a soft, controlled water landing. Experts noted the trailing edge was shredded, consistent with flutter damage, meaning the control surface shook violently at high speed. Furthermore, the flaps were confirmed to have been retracted, putting the plane in a cruise configuration, not a landing setup. A wing flap section found in Tanzania also showed fracture from overload, again pointing to a violent, high-energy impact. For an intentional water landing, one would expect extended flaps and more intact wreckage. Third, the search was built on assumptions. The entire search operation was fundamentally based on the assumption that the plane was on autopilot until fuel exhaustion along the seventh arc. As years passed and hundreds of millions of dollars were spent finding nothing but volcanic ridges and deep trenches, the truth became impossible to ignore. They had been looking in the wrong place. The official search was suspended in early 2017. Families were frustrated, experts were baffled, and the public was left with a story that simply didn't add up. Could the satellite data have been misread, or was there an overlooked piece of technology that could track MH370 more accurately?
Into the vacuum of the failed search stepped Richard Godfrey, a retired British aerospace engineer with a passion for puzzles. Godfrey decided to take a completely different approach, asking a question no one else had dared to ask. What if a missing plane could be tracked not by satellites or military radar, but by amateur radio hobbyists tinkering in their garages? He dug into a technology almost nobody outside the ham radio community had heard of: WSPR. WSPR stands for Weak Signal Propagation Reporter, a system invented in the 2000s. Thousands of amateur radio enthusiasts globally send out tiny, weak radio signals, often less than 1 watt, about the power of a nightlight. These signals bounce off the ionosphere, ionosphere, and travel thousands of miles. Godfrey realized that WSPR acts like a massive spider web stretched around the world. If a huge airplane, such as a Boeing 777, slices through one of those signal threads, it leaves a detectable disturbance. This disturbance might be a tiny dip in signal strength or a slight shift in frequency, sometimes less than a single decibel. But critically, these disturbances are logged in an online database called WSPRnet.
Godfrey hypothesized if MH370 truly flew across the Indian Ocean that night, it must have crossed dozens of these invisible threads. Finding those disturbances could allow him to map the plane's path like a precise trail of breadcrumbs. This wasn't a quick task. For 3 years, Godfrey combed through the WSPR net archive, dealing with more than 200 billion lines of raw data. He built custom software to filter out false alarms from solar storms and background interference. Slowly, a picture started to form. On the night of the disappearance, Godfrey found approximately 130 WSPR anomalies over the Indian Ocean. These weren't random noise. When he plotted them in sequence, they lined up into a track. The track began exactly where Malaysian military radar had last picked up the plane. From there, it curved southwest, then turned south, providing a far more precise path than previously available. The trail didn't fade away. It ended at a very specific spot, providing coordinates that had never been searched before. Godfrey's coordinates point to 29.128 degrees south and 99.34 degrees east. This location is about 1,500 kilometers west of Perth, Australia, and critically, about 200 kilometers inside an area that no official or private search had ever touched. For the first time in years, someone had produced a brand new, data-driven location for MH370. It was a single point, backed up by hard numbers.
After a decade of heartbreak, wild theories, and false leads, the pieces are finally lining up. We now have solid data, a refined target location, and the technology to get the job done. The heavy hitter in deep-sea recovery, Ocean Infinity, is back. If that name rings a bell, it's because they led a massive search in 2018 that covered 112,000 square kilometers, but they missed the current suspected site by inches. This time, things are different. In January 2025, Malaysia's Transport Minister, Anthony Loke, signed a brand new contract with Ocean Infinity. The deal is audacious. No find, no fee. Ocean Infinity is covering all upfront costs, estimated at around $70 million, and only gets paid if they successfully locate the wreck. This gamble alone shows they believe the data is strong. Their current flagship is the massive Armada 7806, a 78-meter vessel launched in 2023. This ship is packed with HUGIN autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, essentially robotic submarines. These drones, made by Kongsberg, can dive 6,000 meters and roam untethered for days. They are equipped with advanced sonar systems, Boeing side-scan sonar for sharp images, synthetic aperture sonar for tiny object detection, multi-beam sonar for 3D mapping, and sub-bottom profiling sonar to peek underneath sediment. The new search zone is a carefully defined 15,000 square kilometer box. This box is zeroed in on the exact hotspot identified by the WSPR analysis at 29 degrees south. Crucially, this area includes locations that have never been searched before. The terrain in this part of the southern Indian Ocean is formidable, described as the kind of place that makes seasoned search teams wary. We are talking about underwater cliffs, mountain ridges, a potential volcano, and deep canyons, with depths reaching 6,000 meters. It is no wonder the plane has remained hidden for so long. Ocean Infinity's fleet of AUVs can cover about 500 square kilometers per day, running around the clock. The entire search box could potentially be swept in about 1 month once operations are fully underway. The mission began in February 2025, operating during the small weather window between January and April. The question is no longer, can MH370 be found? The technology exists. The coordinates are confirmed by independent analysis, WSPR, and drift modeling, and the financial motivation is enormous. This time,
The search is driven by refined data models, artificial intelligence sorting through years of satellite data, and a laser focus on a precise location. The question now is, are we finally about to close the book on one of the greatest mysteries of our time and give the 239 people on board the answer they and their families deserve?
The ship is loaded. The robots are ready. The contract is signed. After years of watching shadows and chasing ghosts, we may be weeks away from knowing the final truth. What do you think will be found at 29 degrees south? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into aviation history and technological breakthrough engaging, make sure to like and subscribe, and click on the next video on your screen to uncover more secrets that were never meant to be found.